welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 37 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So, last we left off, things were getting very interesting in Briggs. Major General Armstrong killed General Raven, and, things aren't totally in the clear yet. Kimbley's still around, and he seems to have a couple Confederates that have now arrived at Briggs. So if anything, the situation feels almost a little bit more tenuous, They also have Winry held hostage here, right up and personal. They've brought her under the pretense of sort of fixing up the automail Edward has so that it doesn't give him frostbite every time he steps outside. So immediately, I foresee a couple problems here. Because one, I assume it's not going to be perfectly tuned to him, given that this seems like a bit of a rush job. And two, given the alloy involved, if it's anything like the combat automail Buccaneer had, Ed's not going to be able to transmute it anywhere near as easily, which I feel will severely hamper him, considering the first order of business is usually transmuting like a knife blade on the end of his arm. So, this is interesting. It seems to me that Kimbley is playing a bit of an angle here, because obviously Winry is a very important hostage, and the Elric brothers are very important sacrifices, so it's important to keep them under control. That Kimbley would seek to ingratiate himself with Winry indicates to me that they're trying to set something up here, and it's definitely not good, Whether what that is just, a moment of hesitation on Winry's part if things get tense, that might be enough. Oh dear. Edward really doth protest a little bit too much considering the circumstances. I feel like you might want to, keep a straight face in front of Kimbley and his goons. Oh, there we have it. It's mutual. They just don't know it yet. Man, if anything, that really only makes things worse. Because, now they're really good hostages. That's really not good. Kimbley's got leverage even if he doesn't quite realize it. Alright, so this is a bit of an interesting encounter here. Naturally, Winry's going to like Buccaneer's automail because I'm sure it's state-of-the-art and then some. But at the same time, I'm not sure how he's going to feel about a civilian fawning over his stuff. Man, they've just taken to each other instantly. I guess that happens when you have an overlapping hobby, because Buccaneer really seems to be into his automail too. Ah, poor guy. Life isn't fair. Truer words have really never been spoken. So I feel like Edward's giving some very interesting advice there. Don't go wandering around, it's real dangerous here. And as he says that, Kimberly just, surreptitiously sips some coffee in the background. That was definitely not an accident in how they framed that shot. Yeah, so it seems to me that now Kimberly wants to get down to business. There's a whole bunch of bad stuff that's going to be going on. Naturally, he's not here with good news. Yeah, definitely not good, since they've separated Alphonse and Edward. Really not good. I think Alphonse has the right idea here. Patience is probably the skill he should be relying on. It wouldn't do for him to kick the door down and then immediately get dogpiled by all the guards. He's gonna have to bide his time and wait for a good opportunity to sort of tip the scales. Alright, so the tunnel is interesting. So, Buccaneer has decided to descend. And he's adamant that if he's not back in 24 hours, they should seal the tunnel. That's a pretty big ask, but considering the creatures they've heard reports of down there, that's a reasonable precaution. So once again, the general is being pretty darn honorable about everything. She's instructing her men that if something goes south and they find about what happened to General Raven, the blame's entirely on her, throw her under the bus, we were just following orders and all that. That might not fly, but at least the idea here is that she's willing to take all the responsibility. So the plot's getting a little bit thicker here. Mustang's little go-between here is suggesting that while Fort Briggs is very defensive and adept at that, they need to join forces with someone with more offensive experience, and in this case, Mustang would fit the bill. So it would seem to me that they're going to pool their forces here. Mustang and Armstrong working together to sort of take care of business and sweep everything away. Oh, that's interesting. So the Flower Woman appears to be a member of the Armstrong family. So, I guess it's nice in a way that the Armstrong family is seemingly so utterly reliable in every regard. Even if they're not all as good-natured as the Major, they're at least reliable. I feel like that reliability and that sense of honor is definitely more than enough to outweigh other character flaws. Now, back in the tunnel, things are not good. The Fort Briggs soldiers are generally pretty tough, but these two are very clearly shaken by whatever they've experienced. So it seems that light that casts a shadow is the culprit here, as it were. And, that really seems to bear out based on what we're seeing, although whatever this shadow creature is, it seems tactful enough to sort of not just slaughter everyone mindlessly. That's almost more disturbing than just a horrific shadow creature full of eyes and teeth. Ooh, hint, hint, hint. Man, that weird little mix of like the shadow creature's hand and then Salim Bradley showing up, that's interesting, because we already know Bradley's a homunculus. I find it interesting that Salim is being rather interrogative here, saying, what's going on here? You've got stuff for my dad and all that? And he says it with the countenance of a child, but that's rather a pointed question. I mean, everybody just sort of chalks it up to, oh, he's just a smart kid. And, that's reasonable. Some kids are smart, and they don't always have a filter in terms of, what they should and shouldn't say. But I think the real bombshell takeaway here is that Mrs. Bradley drops that Salim is related to Bradley. That's the big red flag right there. Things aren't adding up. Hawkeye knows things aren't adding up. And that bodes poorly for her. Man, this whole scene here where Salim reveals himself, this really shines some extra light on that encounter in the library where Salim's like, hey, what you guys doing? You're studying stuff? Oh, isn't that interesting? Tell me more. It's not that he was just like a nosy little brat. He was fishing for information to keep tabs on the Elric brothers. And whether or not he actually got anything useful out of them, that he was keeping tabs on their goings-on is definitely... well, it's kind of spooky in retrospect, Like, the Elric brothers had no idea that they were being faced with pride. Man, I really have to admire Hawkeye's bravery to sort of mouth off to Pride, even in the situation she's in. Considering that Pride was able to literally tear people to pieces, I'd imagine it wouldn't take much to do the same to Hawkeye if Pride felt like it. I mean, fortunately, Hawkeye has more value as a hostage currently, but, that's not exactly a tenable position. Alright, so this is an interesting twist. Kimberly is not coming to threaten the Elric brothers, at least not right away. He's saying, I need your help with stuff. Find Scar, find Dr. Marco, and take part in our little ritual. So it seems like this is a really bad thing, They're basically saying, hey, Ed, would you mind committing an atrocity here by killing everyone in the fort? Obviously, he's not going to do that. But I feel like Kimberly's just doing this to be evil, I feel like he gets a perverse joy out of doing the whole thing, although, if it really gets down to it, he could take care of that whole part. So this is interesting. Kimberly is taking an interesting approach to the conflict. He's not vested in the homunculi in as much as they're not really asking him to do anything other than stuff he wants to do. I don't know, it sort of reminds me of, kind of the Joker, Like, Kimberly's talking about, he's picked a side, he opposes the other side, and the world will decide who is correct and sane. So, Edward sort of assumes he's insane, but Kimberly's banking on the idea that if the homunculi win, he will be rendered sane just because they won, in the winners write the history books sort of way. It is very interesting that Kimberly has brought a Philosopher's Stone to the bargain. I mean, it's easy to say that you're not going to use the Philosopher's Stone because it's morally equivalent to killing people. It's easy to say that when it's an abstract thing, but when it's sitting there right in front of you, I'd imagine it's a hell of a lot more difficult to come to the decision that you're going to turn it down. So the Elric brothers are in a real bad way here. They've got to discuss everything out in the open in a jail cell right in front of Kimberly. Oh dear. Edward's being pretty out in the open about this. I'm being ordered to do this. You were brought here as a hostage, so... I can't exactly refuse an order with you around. I guess if nothing else, Winry seems to learn the lesson not to trust government officials here. Despite what was seemingly a little moment of doubt here, Ed is pretty adamant about not using the stone. Well, okay, maybe I was a little too quick to the punch here. Alphonse seems to think that Edward is actually going to use the stone, and you know what? Ed's almost playing that up a little bit too. Edward is also saying that the First Order business is we're going to hunt down Scar because I'm willing to help, so, let's make a bit of a bargain here. I mean, that's fair. That's a fair point on Edward's part, but at the same time, I feel like he's being a bit double-binding here. Like, he's going along with it, but he's not truly intent on doing a bunch of horrible things that Kimberly would have him do. So there we go. Alphonse knows he's not actually going to use the Philosopher's Stone. He's just playing along for the time being. And I mean, when you get down to it, really what else could you do in this situation other than play along and hope for an opportunity to turn the balance of things? Probably the biggest takeaway here is that Winry herself is looking to get into the fray somehow. She seems to be deciding to take an active role in things rather than just going along with everything and being a hostage. It's rather commendable, considering that she doesn't really have much in the way of combat prowess. She has decided, for one reason or another, that the best approach here is to tag along. So, she's got a good excuse. I've just modified Edward's automail. What if it malfunctions? And this is rather cunning. Edward's playing along and arguing about it just to sort of give Kimberly the impression that this is not something either of them is willing to drop. And I guess since it doesn't involve slaughtering innocent people, Kimberly really doesn't care, so he's willing to cede ground. I'm not sure how I feel about Winry tagging along, but I guess it's probably better than sitting around in the fort waiting for bad things to happen. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.